Hey guys, my name is Benjamin Palmore, and I'm here to speak about Hens and Marts AB today. I hope everyone's doing well throughout these times and staying safe. So, this is just a little brief history about the company. This isn't a history project, so I'm not going to spend too long on this. For those of you who don't know what H&M is at all, it's a retail clothing company that focuses on trendy clothing. And so, to start off with history, in 1947, Hens, which is what the H stands for in H&M, was founded by Erling Persson as a local women's clothing store, just strictly women's. And 21 years later, Persson decided to purchase Maritz, which was a outdoor sportswear company that focused mainly on men's clothing, and he merged the two. So now they're basically focusing on men's and women's, not only a single gender. And move fast forward to 1980 is when they start their first global expansion. When they start to move into Germany and the Netherlands, this is mainly focused on Europe expansion. And in 1998 was their first online presence of the retailer. This was mainly only in Sweden, and throughout the years they've adapted and offered the online presence to pretty much everywhere now. But in 2000 was the first westward expansion, and that's when they put their first store in New York City. That was the first store in the US. And in 2014, they added a new sportswear line. And as I mentioned earlier, sportswear was what Martz was originally. And so it looks like they're getting back to their roots. So the design process, it aligns perfectly with their supply chain business model of a push and pull supply chain. So the design process is done more than a year in advance, and this is long term planning and forecasting, which leads me to believe that they run on sort of a push supply chain decision. And also, but at the same time, they have real time reacting. So, although these designs and things are done more than a year out in advance, they look at what customers are purchasing as well on a day to day basis, and react to that by upping production in certain things. So, that also enacts a pull part of the supply chain strategy. And this long term design process has a 100 person team, and they all sit in a room and sit and make up new collections to make, forecast trends of what's going to be in style, and the whole 9 yards about forecasting clothing trends. Um, so the process design, how H&M kind of runs things, they have no factories. They manage all their inventories out of stores, and they are heavily in the game of outsourcing. So they outsource to over 800 different suppliers. All of those are located in Europe and Asia. And the low inventory factor of their company and business model helps them with their economies of scale. So how they improve their economies of scale is by focusing on low inventory but high production. So this is kind of opposite of how Walmart runs their things with clothing. Walmart's always going to have a lot on hand. They have many factories as well, and they have way more room for inventory. So their economies of scale are basically profited by or increased by having so much product on hand. And the lead times for H&M and the just-in-time inventory. So this is how this works. When H&M they have no inventory in any of the factories, obviously, because they don't own any factories. So they're going to have all their inventory in stores, like I said, and the just-in-time purchasing. So when employees are stocking the shelves every however so often they may stock the shelves, and customers are buying out shirts and clothes and all types of clothes, they have to they have to ship new items in, and these have to come from the producers. We'll get into that on the next slide, but these have to come straight from the producers because they're not producing anything. They don't have any factories, and that's how this is a responsive supply chain as well, because they're responding. Their just-in-time inventory and purchasing is in a response to customers' trends and purchasing habits, and that's why it also relies on close communication with the suppliers that they outsource to, so they can make sure they have the right things in stock for when customers want to buy them. So a little bit about how the supply chain works for H&M. As I mentioned, they outsource all these things to factories in Asia and Europe. The first tier suppliers, they basically work as the producers because they're getting these materials outsourced to them, and they're making the products, sending it to the retailer, which H&M acts as the primary retailer, the sole retailer, and then from there the customer receives the product. And the suppliers receive all this purchasing information on where the items need to go from purchasing offices located and constructed near the first tier producers. I meant first tier suppliers. So in the H&M's weaknesses, a lot of things can go wrong with the having no factories and low inventory. So if a pandemic comes up like the coronavirus, like how it has now, and you have all your inventory that's based on trends in stock in your stores, and no one's really buying those now, you're not going to be able to probably sell those when people are back shopping and new trends have come out. So you're going to have to either try and recycle them, or you're going to have to dispose of them somehow. And H&M does a good job of combating this because they do recycle, just like in the Johnson Toy Company case. So we looked at a solution to wastage like that. And for the most part, they can recycle it, but a lot of times you can't recycle 100% of a product. And the forecasting system can also be flawed because in clothing, as you look more than a year in advance, you might not be able to see anything coming. You might predict one style is gonna come back in and return into style, but the trends head a totally different way, and people are wearing totally different things. And the last weakness H&M has is I feel like there's a cap to how much H&M can expand and grow from where they are now. Because of the lack of factories, the only way they can continue to grow is if they start to outsource more and use more exterior suppliers. So as far as H&M competitive strengths and advantages go, for their flexibility, they can respond fast to customers' updated trends and needs as they have low inventories, so they don't have to worry about too much wastage if they have to change with what the customers as the customers are changing. I mean, for the supply chain structure, because of this flexibility and no factories and the uniqueness of it, they have a competitive edge versus a lot of retail companies that may rely heavily on factories in which they store their inventories. The online availability, this is really more of a edge they can continue to gain as they have a strong online presence, and as we live now, online presence is just growing and growing and growing, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. And the affordability of their clothes. So versus H&M is very unique because versus cheap clothing, which doesn't usually focus on the trendiness, it just focuses more on clothing people and getting people clothes, and versus designer clothes, which are very expensive and focus heavily on the trends. H&M is a good middleman where they focus on affordability and trends that are in style, so that a person can be on a budget and still look in with the times. That's it for my presentation. It was just a brief summarization of my paper. I wish we could have gone more in depth here, but we have a time limit. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoy my paper as well, and have a nice day.